Good morning. It's an honor to be here representing aviation in this forum and participating in this esteemed panel. Thank you for asking me to be here. After all, I wouldn't be here and many of us wouldn't be here without the marvel of flight. So I think that aviation has some interesting lessons on risk management to share. When you think about it, few businesses are as challenged in managing risk as aviation. We operate in a highly competitive, dynamic, and global environment that is also focused on cost minimization. Safety is our first priority, always. But even if cost were not an object, the risk of minimization would be huge because air travel is advancing, growing every year. New aircraft are coming on board and becoming more and more complex. Airlines are constantly being formed, and thousands of flight crew, logistics people, and maintenance people have to be trained and constantly retrained. Regulatory agencies are stressed to keep up with this demand. And as valuable as contemporary processes such as computerized maintenance tracking are, mitigating risk in aviation ultimately resides in a philosophy of safety. So let's talk about how you develop a culture of safety. And to do that, I would like to use a case study that began in the United States. With the anticipation of the continued expansion of air traffic, in the 90s, the US policymakers understood that changes needed to take place so the accident rate did not continue to grow in a straight line along with flight hours. Therefore, in 1994, the then US Secretary of Transportation, Federico Pena, challenged the industry by setting an objective of 0 accidents. From that point on began a steady decline in accident rates. Today, anyone that boards a US jet flight in the United States at random will incur an accidental death risk of 1 in 14 million. Interestingly, this is far greater than the chances of a child who's born in the US today becoming the US president. That is 1 in 2 million. Globally, though, we are not at that level. In fact, the developing countries, it is 1 in 1.2 million flights. So how do we get to the level of safety that we all need? Our industry is adopting a very structured safety oversight program worldwide. It's called Safety Management Systems, or SMS. And in this, everyone plays by the same rules. For example, just as pilots have checklists that they use to fly by, now an airline will have a checklist that it needs to operate by. A regular, like the Federal Aviation Administration or the European Aviation Safety Authority, will present a checklist to an airline certificate holder with questions that require that processes are validated against those questions and against regulations to ensure compliance. Now, an example might be a de-icing procedure. And as a passenger, when you sit in your aircraft and you look outside the window, you might think this is a relatively simple procedure. But it is a mission-critical procedure and one that is far more complex than you may realize, because behind the scenes, there must be a harmonized ballet between the logistics people, the equipment people, the flight crews, the ground crews, and there must be no mistakes. It is a mission-critical process, as I mentioned. So these sets of processes are set out in the certificate holder's operating procedures. But oftentimes, when put to the test in preparation for an SMS audit, Even this carrier safety officer may be surprised to find that the processes are not as well coordinated as they expected to find. So for the system to work day in and day out, it must rely on self-motivated reporting of hazard. That's asking a lot of human beings. But this is the critical element in the SMS philosophy. The system, in essence, that runs on trust. It is the only way we can achieve a zero accident rate. It's hard to earn the trust of tens of thousands of people that work in an airline. They're human beings, and oftentimes what motivates their response is a simple fear. The fear of retribution, the fear of losing a license or an operating certificate, or in some extreme cases, the fear of punishment. Fear is the greatest system hazard of all. So the greatest challenge for the air transport industry is removing that fear of retribution. So that's why in the US, when a public-private partnership was formed, known as the Future of Aviation Advisory Committee, they looked at key safety issues and made two important recommendations related to safety. First, they recommended a semi-annual workforce management conference to bridge the issues between the aviation workers and management teams and to build trust. Secondly, the group recommended comprehensive legal protections for voluntary and mandated SMS safety data and management programs. These are two really good guiding principles, if you ask me. Beyond these two recommendations, how do we as leaders shift the mood from one of fear to one of transparency and trust? I'm going to use a sports analogy here because I'm sure there are many sports fans in the rooms. And those of you that are realize that today every practice and every game is filmed in detail and analyzed and discussed by the teams. All teams do this, but how the coaches use the data is what makes the difference. One type of coach will actually instill fear in the players by pointing out mistakes, critiquing every move, and demanding improvement. Another type of coach will candidly discuss players' performance to offer suggestions, while consistently reminding the players of the team mission and the importance of their harmonized effort together. This kind of coach earns the players' trust by making the individuals better players in the context of the whole. As leaders and role models within our respected fields, we can decide what kind of coaching model we want to use. So I want to leave you with the thought that it is ultimately a culture of safety that mitigates risk. A culture built on trust, mutual understanding, and transparency backed up by legal protections. This is a safety management system in our industry that will work. And in all likelihoods, it will work in other industries as well. Thank you very much for asking me here today to share our industry's experiences.